Hey everybody, welcome to a very special episode of Impact Theory. I have the guest that I've wanted to interview this whole time with me here today, the one, the only, Mrs. Bilyeu. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, baby. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's good to have you. For those of you who don't know, this is Elizabeth Diana Bilyeu, a.k.a. Lisa, a.k.a. the absolute center of my universe. We are going to be doing a very special Valentine's Day episode today, so we're going to be interviewing each other. We've taken fan questions. We're going to be going through those, and we're also just going to be diving into things that either we know about each other and think would be a fun question to share, or things that maybe come up that we're not sure how the other person would answer, and I think that will be a lot of fun.
Yeah, even after 16 years, or almost 17.
Yeah.
16 years, we still surprise each
You're
other.
rounding up a bit aggressively, though, if I'm honest.
We met 16 years ago.
Yeah,
16
but you
and a half.
You said almost 17. So, yeah, I will give you 16 and a half. That's pretty legit. But, yeah, so we've just a little bit of a recap. We have been married for going on 15 years now, so a little over 14 and a half. We're excited. This is our big year anniversary. Every 5 years, we try to do something really special, so that's going to be a lot of fun. All right, without further ado, though, let's dive into the questions, and I will kick us off. So, again, thank you for joining us. She's always wanted to hide behind the camera. She's never wanted to be in front of the camera, and so I've been pestering her for a while. I thought this would be a great opportunity, and the team finally helped me convince her to do it, so here we are. All right, this is a fan question. It comes from Kayla W., and her question is, what do you recommend if you are more ambitious than your partner?
Oh, that's a good one. So here's the truth. You are more ambitious than I am.
I'll agree to that.
So for me, it's not seeing that as a negative. So you're extremely ambitious. I love that in you. That is one thing that really draws me to you. I find that very sexy.
It's going to get weird real fast, ladies and gentlemen.
And so, yeah, I just don't take that as a negative on me. And I am there to support you. And there's a famous phrase in My Big Fat Greek Wedding where it's like, the man is the head, but the woman is the neck. For me, that means I'm your foundation. So when you're this ambitious, I'm your foundation to enable you to keep going and live out your ambition, basically.
Yeah, we watched a show. This is something that really helped us conceptualize how to think about this. So I'm very alpha, and my wife is beta. And certainly in the Western world, I think that's taken on a pretty negative connotation. And you and I were watching that show about the wolves, and it gave us a way to understand that the way that people have come to sort of bastardize what it means to be a beta is I think really negatively impacting a lot of people who would make an amazing beta. So let's define it. In the world of wolves, an alpha is not always the biggest, not always the strongest. They are the decision maker. So they're the leader. They're the one that wants to have the vision, go out and put it forth. And in the world of wolves, they would be the one that would lead the pack to hunting, to safety, to making sure that the entire pack is taken care of, order is kept, and all of that. And seeing a beta wolf was incredibly interesting because the beta is not a push around. And in the documentary that we saw, the beta was a tough nut, man. That was when you did not want to fuck with the beta. And it really reminded me of you. And I think people, because you're petite, they don't necessarily understand how tough you are. And so I recognize that in seeing the wolves and seeing how it was the beta that kept other people at bay, that really protected the alpha. And the beta just wasn't the one that wanted necessarily to lead, but it understood that it had an incredibly important role, and that it was a facilitator, and that by protecting the alpha, by carving out space for the alpha to make those decisions, not only did it bring a tremendous amount of value and really contribute to making sure that that singular vision is executed upon, because you really can't have people fighting for the alpha role. And that was something that was really important for us to define, and hopefully later I'll remember this when people talk about what was the hardest thing for you to get over or to deal with in the relationship. It was when you were thrust into an alpha role in the company, and then how did we rebalance so that we weren't fighting for control back at home. which is interesting. We'll go into that later. But understanding that while alpha is about leadership, it's not necessarily a more important role, and that the beta has this incredibly needed role to serve in the relationship. Both are of equal value. And once I could really see that in the animal world, I realized that we had somehow tarnished by making the beta seem like it was subjugating itself to the alpha, which you very much do not do. And we are very much equals in the relationship. We both see ourselves as having a role of contributing something to the overall relationship, and that's critical. And I think one of the most important things in our relationship is being able to find that balance of understanding that leadership is a role. It is not a better place to be. It isn't superior.
And from my perspective, as a woman, I grew up with a very strong mother. She had a very strong will. And so having learned that, I wanted to pride myself on being a strong woman. And when we met, you made it very clear right from the get-go, like, I am alpha. So if there's going to be any type of competition between us, like, this isn't going to work out. And I think we found an amazing balance where that meant, it didn't mean that made me weaker. Like, I can still be as strong as, I want to push and am. But yeah, it didn't make me weaker. And understanding that, and then kind of saying, like, I think most women, oh God,
I don't know if I'm in trouble here.
I know. I'm going to say it in a way.
Yeah, be honest.
Every strong woman I know, when they're really being honest, they say they want a man to lead them. Like, so we're watching The Crown. In fact, that's a perfect example. The Queen of England still wants her husband, who's the prince, so technically by title, she's much more powerful than he is. She still wants her husband to lead. And it was so cool.
Be clear, though, because in the show, she wants him to lead in matters of the family.
Yeah.
Right? So when she's the queen, and this is a perfect example, because when you were saying that, you want to be strong, there are times you're stronger than me. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. You're way more hardcore in the gym than I am. You have tremendous emotional strength, and there have been times where I've been rocked, and you've been there to support me unquestionably. While you have that beta role, there's definitely times where you're flexing emotional muscle and really carrying the family forward. And in The Crown, you see that where, hey, man, when it is a matter of state, when it is a matter of the crown, like, she doesn't take shit from anybody.
That's true.
And she stands up for herself, and she leads, and she doesn't, she'll take advisement for sure, but she is the leader in that case. But when it comes to issues of the family, then, she wants her husband to be a strong and powerful man. And she said the same thing that you said, which is that was part of what drew her to him.
Yeah, absolutely. And my dad is a very strong-willed man and is a leader. And I grew up seeing how he respected women. He was very good to women. He treated his daughters, like, amazingly well. He buys us flowers, like, amazing, amazing, amazing man. And I think I, subconsciously looked for that in you, or, in somebody. And so when I met you, and you were super romantic and sweet and emotional and vulnerable and open and articulate in your emotions, like, all of that, but it didn't make you weak. You always wanted to be the alpha, and you were the alpha. And so having those two skill sets, it's not really skill sets.
Yeah, no, I think it is. And look, I think a huge part of leadership, whether it's in a relationship, in a business, in whatever, is understanding that one of the key components of leadership is making everybody understand that they're equals, that you're not superior to them, that they bring a tremendous amount of value. That's so critical, and you definitely see it in your family. And I think that's what's really allowed us to get where we are, is if either one of us felt like we weren't the equal of the other, that it wouldn't work. It just diminishes your vision of yourself. Like, tip number one, I think the role of anybody in a relationship is to make the other person feel better about themselves when they're around you. Like, simple as. I always wanted you to feel better about yourself when you were around me, which means I've got to be building you up. I've got to make you feel like an equal. I've got to recognize you when you're the one that's being stronger, when you're carrying extra weight. Like, I want you to know that I appreciate that I'm willing to accept that help from you. And that was hard for me. And I know, early in our relationship, that was something that we struggled with, was I wanted to be better than you at everything, right?
Yes, I remember.
And it was just really, really stupid, but it was nonetheless true. Like, I felt like I had to be, right? That I needed to impress you, and that everything had to be, like, I thought you wanted me to be this invincible winner who always knew best and, just was always the strongest. And then I remember this movie that I saw. Like, this movie, like, this is one of those movies that sort of feeds into why impact theory is so important to me. It's a movie called Daryl. It was made by Disney, and it was about this kid who was a robot. And his dad had to tell him, like, basically, don't be so perfect. Your mom needs to be needed. And that notion of everybody, like, we need to be needed, right? And I thought, well, I'm acting like I get that I need to be needed and that you should need me, but you need to be needed and I should need you, and I should open space in that and be, quite frankly, strong enough to admit that when I'm weak, right? And that I need help.
And we actually had that discussion where I said to you, like, I want to be good at things too. So even though you're trying to impress me at being best at everything, in your effort to impress me, you're actually making me feel like I'm not good at things. And so kind of having that realization, I think you were like, yes, that's true.
That, and it's not like I was faking being worse at stuff. Like, I was just empirically worse at stuff. And one thing that was really hard for me to admit, like, I am ridiculously bad at logistics. Like, all the things that we'll consider typical male traits, logistics, systems, directions, like all of those things, I am just objectively horrible at. And you happen to be really good at. And it's really interesting that I am, like, so if it's a spectrum and you've got, like, the thick-necked pub brawler over here who's the hyper masculine guy, and then you've got the cries at the drop of a hat, only ever wanted to be a mother, over here, hyper feminine. I'm edging up towards the middle. I'm very in touch with my feminine side. I am moved by art to no end. Like, I'm very in touch with emotion, and you're, like, very hardcore. You've got, like, toughness about you, and that's, and you're good at systems and logistics and things that are more traditionally associated with masculinity. And I think that's actually helped us really understand each other and complement each other. So, one thing that I've had to learn the hard way, because I really had to push myself to be just, like, tougher and more traditionally masculine to make sure that I could accomplish the things that I wanted to accomplish. In pushing myself that way, I had to reopen space for vulnerability. I had to reopen space for not being great at everything, to accept that, this not only woman, but this incredibly petite woman, was just amazing at stuff, and to make sure that was recognized and you had that space.
Yeah, and I think during that process, the fact that we were willing to be honest with each other, so where when you are vulnerable, you can say, I'm vulnerable, but this is how I feel, and knowing that truth, the other person's not going to use that against you. So even with the alpha beta, having that honest discussion allowed us to immediately kind of put ourselves into understanding our roles of our relationship.
Yeah, for sure. All right, at the risk of not ever asking another question, why don't we go to the next one?
All right, I'll ask the next one. Oh, I like this one. How important is it? Oh, sorry, I should say it's from Mickey Suba. How important is it to have time away from your partner?
This is something that my wife and I are ridiculously candid about. I think it's super important. Yeah. And I think that selfish time, which is something that we talk a lot about, you need to be selfish. You need to not lose your sense of identity. And, that's coming from two people who have completely embraced being codependent and really intertwining our lives and making sure that we have one vision and one thing that we're aiming at and that we're doing it collectively as a unit. But at the same time, like, dude, be selfish, take selfish time. Like, we take selfish time every weekend, which is, because we work so much during the week, the weekends really are time to reconnect and rebond. But even in that time, the time of most sort of us together, we make sure that we have selfish time. Yeah,
and we always discuss that. What's your selfish desire for this weekend? And you may say, I want to play video games and read. For me, I may want to watch The Real Housewives.
Might, maybe.
And so then we discuss, okay, well, you don't want to do that and I don't want to do that. So what we'll do is maybe between 12 and 2 o'clock on Saturday, you do your selfish thing, I'll do my selfish thing, and then we'll get together again right after that.
So you're gonna tell lies? That's we've just gone straight to lying to the audience.
Why am I lying?
Because the truth is, my wife has very like strict rules about stuff like that. So there's no universe in which during the middle of the day that I would ever do selfish time. Selfish time in my wife has a lot of rules with stuff like this, and they're amazing. And that's the thing. Like I have learned, this is one of those things I have learned over time. Like she is so much better at that. Like you're so much better at knowing like why it would be optimal to do selfish time at night, right? So at night, maybe you're getting a little bit more tired, and just to make sure that you prioritize during the day to make sure we reconnect and we get that time, because something may come up and you never know what's going to happen. And at night, like you run out of time for something. And if you're going to run out of time for something, then better to run out of time for video games or The Real Housewives than to run out of time to really connect and do the thing that we love doing the things that we love doing together. So just, being really careful about prioritizing. So that's one of those things that like, yeah, they need to know that about you.
That's actually very true.
Yeah.
And I think people get so caught up with the word selfish. And, so it's like when you travel, so as you all know, this man works a lot. And so for me, selfish is I want to spend time with you. I want to have dinner. I want to have breakfast. I want to cuddle, like whatever that is. And you're very honest by saying, okay, this is what I want to do. So it's going to take me 4 hours. I'm going to work, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And then you leave me to decide how we want to structure the day so that you get what you want and then I get what I want. And just by calling it selfish and understanding it's actually not a negative thing, that we actually work so beautifully together to figure it out. And to be honest, sometimes I get super excited about selfish time. And if I can't share my excitement with you, then you're my best friend. So how can I... now I feel, and his damn phone again.
Like I really can't believe how many I didn't. That's a really important concept. Being able to be honest with each other about what you want, whether it's selfish or not, just, putting it out there and knowing that you'll work through. And if whatever you want that's selfish is rubbing the other person the wrong way, then you adjust and go from there. But to have to hide things from your partner is just quite frankly, it's a stupid way to set things up. You're just setting yourself up for disaster. And in fact, that was something I was pretty over the top about at the beginning of our relationship. I was aggressively myself, because I was like, well, if this is going to be something, then it needs to be exactly who I am, so that I'm not trying to hide something.
Yeah, and I think for us, we pride ourselves so much on being 100% honest, even when it may make the other person feel slightly bad, or like we have to be honest with each other, and then we work through it through dialogue to figure it out.
Yeah, and you can't imagine how many times I've wanted so desperately to lie to you, because it's like, oh God, if I say the honest thing about what I really want to do or whatever, that, oh man, it's gonna like wind her up, and then we have to like process through all that. But lying makes me feel alone.
Can we talk about honesty for a second? Because I have an awesome story.
Let's get crazy.
This is exact proof of what you just said.
Okay,
so
I don't know how nervous to be right now.
Very nervous. No. So, 2 years ago. So we have date night. Try to do it once a week, usually on a Saturday. Sometimes we go out, sometimes we stay in. But this one particular date night, I think it'd been a while, and I was really excited about it. I bought a new top. All you women know out there, when you're going shopping, like how good you're going to look and how much you can't wait for your other half or whoever to really compliment you. So I buy this lovely top, I put it on. It's date night. Come down the stairs. He's waiting at the bottom. And he's like, all right, let's go. So I'm like, okay, well, he didn't say anything. Like, I've got my nice new top on. Doesn't matter. Like, I know how kind of your mind goes, thinking about work. And so I was like, he'll say something in a minute. We get in the car, we go to the restaurant. We're sitting at the bar waiting for our table. He still doesn't say anything. I'm like, God, I think I look really hot right now. Like, I can't believe that you're not, like, complimenting how good I look. And so I thought, well, we always have a thing between us where it's like, don't test the other person. So I'm never going to test you. They're going to remember my birthday, that you're going to know over the last 6 months that I've been hinting about a birthday gift. Like, just tell you what I want. So I'm like, okay, you know what? We've always said don't test each other. So I'm just going to ask him, does he like my top? So I turn around to you and I say, so babe, what do you think of this top? And he, no joke, looks me up and down and goes, So we haven't been on a date for a couple of weeks. I'm super excited. I get a new top. I put it on. I feel really good. And he looks at me and goes, And in that moment, my heart broke. So I went a little quiet. You start asking me some questions, and you could tell I was a little annoyed.
Yeah, of
and
course.
so you say, baby, why are you so annoyed? Or like, do you seem a little upset? Like, did I upset you? I said, well, yeah, because like I really wanted to look good for you. And I will remember this till the day I die. You looked at me and you said, but do you remember 2-3 weeks ago when you were in bed and you were just waking up and your hair's a mess and you don't have any makeup on and you're in your pajamas, and I stroked your face and I told you how beautiful you looked? And I said, yes. And you said to me, that was honesty. And I need you to know that I will always be honest with you when you're 90. And when I tell you you look beautiful, I really mean it. But if I just say it because I want to make you feel better, it almost becomes meaningless. And so, God, I mean, ladies, how do you argue with that, honestly? Like, it made such sense to me because you do. You tell me sometimes in the most craziest moments how beautiful you think I am. And I think I look a state. I've just worked out, my hair's, a mess. But it's that honesty. It's that when I say something to you, I mean it to my core. And so even though I know in this moment, you're going to be upset by the fact that I've gone, like I don't really like your top. But honesty is so important that you're willing to do that. And so that hit me really hard. And in that moment, we then discussed, okay, but it still hurt my feelings that you didn't like what I was wearing, and now I'm on a date and you don't think I look as, beautiful as I think I could look. So we figured it out. We said, all right, well, next time to solve the problem, because I can't hide my emotional disappointment, right? You've got to be honest with yourself of that. So even though your intentions were beautiful, I still got upset by the fact that I didn't feel pretty. Oops. So we said, okay, well, how do we still solve the issue at hand? And that was, all right, so next time we go out on a date, I'm going to ask you before we leave the house if you like my top. And if you don't, then I'm going to run upstairs and get changed. If that's what I want to do, right? If that's my most important thing that night is to make you drool, then I'm going to wear something that's going to make you drool. And so we had that agreement. And so it's taking the issue, discussing it, and then figuring out solutions without getting your back up, getting all emotional, getting caught up in the hurt, when really you were being so freaking romantic with your words. So yeah, that's how honest this man is.
Yes, and I actually got bizarrely emotional as you were telling that story. And a key thing for me is, like, you've got to make your significant other, especially, like, I guess I don't worry so much about this, but I think a lot about it with you. I want you to know how beautiful I find you. Like, that's important. So, I don't want that to get lost. Like, the reason that I tell her she looks beautiful in those random moments is it's so important to externalize that. Like, it's so easy to have that fleeting thought, you look good, like, you work out a lot. So, there'll be times where it's like, oh my God, your shoulders look amazing. Your back looks amazing, whatever. And it's this fleeting moment. We're rushing around in the kitchen or something in the morning. And I really, really stop and take the time to externalize those things. So, I don't want people to think that I advise, like, routinely being like, you look all right. It's like,
in all fairness, I asked you, and so I think for you weren't going to lie to me.
Yes, very correct. But taking the time to make the other person feel beautiful, to feel valued, like, that is so important. To let people know how much they mean to you. It's just absolutely, absolutely critical. And I see people make that mistake all the time, especially over time. And I think that's one of the biggest problems in a relationship. The other person becomes so known to you, like, everything about them. Maybe they wear like a top that and I guess we should translate for Americans, a shirt that, I love for the first 6 months that you have it. And then I begin to, take it for granted after that and don't even think about it. And so you're no longer getting that same effect from wearing that outfit, which then doesn't make you feel good. And so like you really have to stop to take the time to externalize, to tell people what you think, to keep things fresh in your mind, to remember like how lucky you are to be with this person that, you're sharing experiences. And that's so, so important. How you make the other person feel. Not even how you treat them, how you make them feel. If you don't make them feel better about themselves when they're around you, like your relationship isn't going to last. I'll just tell you that right now.
Truth.
All right. Next question. This comes from Jennifer C. When you first met someone you really like, it's easy to get swept away by all of the excitement. What kinds of questions would you recommend asking in order to get a better understanding of the other person's values?
What questions?
Well, what questions did you ask me?
Oh, God. I think at 21, they were probably pathetic.
They certainly didn't seem pathetic that night. Our first date was electrifying.
It was.
Electrifying. In fact, we went on our first date and never dated anybody else since. So, I mean, that was like, boom, right from the jump. So it wasn't love at first sight. I don't believe in that. But it was certainly like tractor beam drawn in.
Yeah.
So
I think really you want to get to the fundamentals of who that person is, like what their values are. I think it would be, where do you want to be in 5 years?
She didn't ask me that.
I didn't know. That's the thing. Like, I think I'd ask different questions now.
That is very true.
Because of what is important to me back when I was 21, I wasn't looking for a husband.
All right, so then let's.
So the questions I probably said is like, what cool car do you have? Or
you sadly had already seen it, and you thought my car was an old man's car.
It was a Buick.
I did not have a lot of game. I am sad to report. I was just starting to get game, though. You have to admit, like by the time you and I met, even though my car did not reflect it, I had finally had some game. Yes.
Yeah, you ignored me for like a month and a half.
Rule number 1.
And that definitely was attractive to me.
Yeah, you have to.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a whole nother episode, but yeah, you have to. So, well, let's get to it. So, you want to assess somebody's values today. Let's empower young people. What should they be?
Yeah, I think it's.
So, where will you be in 5 years?
Where do you want to be in 5 years? So, it at least shows you whether they have a vision of what they want to do. One thing that we used to ask whenever we would interview for people coming into Quest for jobs, the popular question was, if you had $100 million, what would you do with it? For
the record, I would never ask that question. I just want the record to reflect.
Because you wouldn't say 100 million?
Never, no way.
What would you say?
It's always the same. If you had $7.4 billion.
Okay, so see, I'm a little more, God, I don't want to even say realistic, because why isn't how many?
7.4 billion.
That's realistic, right?
There
if
you
put
go.
your mind to it. So I would say 100 million.
Okay.
You would say 7.
Because got it.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Because really, what would you do with your day, right? I mean, we used to play that game when we were dirt poor. Oh my God, if we had $10 million in our bank, like what would we do? And we would dream, and it's like we would travel here and we'd go there. And then as we got older and really found, ourselves, or at least I can speak for myself, none of that mattered. And you've said this before publicly, but, impact theory is a very clear explanation of what we would do if we had money.
Yeah.
We don't own an island,
Yet.
But yeah, I mean, I work probably 12 hours a day, and you kind of fly by that. You like 16 hours a day. But you don't
On my short days.
on these short days,
Just
yeah.
to reflect.
But you don't have to, right? We both could absolutely live the life of luxury with, margaritas, sunbathing, you in the shade, me in the sun. But neither of us are driven by that. So I think asking the question, at least for me, was, what would you do with $100 million, just goes to show what a person's values are and what they prioritize.
What else?
What are the important things that you look for in a partner?
Well, while you vamp, I'll. You're asking the other person?
That's the question. That's what I would ask.
Okay. What do you value in the other person?
Yeah.
Okay.
In a partner, because if we said that on our first date and you said, I want a wife to stay at home and cook and have pop-out kids, and I want a soccer team, and I'd be like, well, later, that's not me.
Right.
so yeah, maybe that would be the other question.
Okay.
I just don't know on a first date though if people would be honest. We were brutally honest with each other.
I don't know that she's so focused on the first date. She just wants to know, like, how do you assess somebody's values, right?
Yeah.
So asking
what
them
about
directly. I think that you have to take a little bit more pedestrian of an approach. So to me, it is literally when I'm interviewing people for to be an employee, that's exactly what I'm trying to assess. I'm trying to figure out what their value system is, what drives them. And so I ask people, what are you most passionate about in the world? And then a lot of times, I don't know. They don't know what they're passionate about. What's the last book you read? How many...
But let's say, so you're looking for a partner.
Yeah.
Do you care what book I read?
Oh, of course.
I don't read books.
You don't read books very often, but I care about the answer, right? And if we hadn't aligned on like virtually everything else, that would have been a problem.
And just by the way, I don't read books, but I have a man here who is my cliff notes to every book out there. So...
But, and to your point about what mattered back then and what matters now, I wouldn't have asked that back then because I didn't know how important it was going to become in my life. But yeah, so trying to assess somebody's values, those are the things. But you know what? In fact, so you gave us the perspective from now. I'll tell you what the things were that we were actually talking about back then. Do you like Christmas? Right?
True.
Tell me about your parents.
Family was a big deal for us.
Big deal, right? We're both super, super into our families. Christmas was a huge thing that we connected over because to me that's magic.
Yeah.
Like can you recapture as an adult that the magic of childhood? And that was something that I wanted to be with somebody that could see like that. I wanted to see if you were excitable, so I didn't have a question for it, but that was something that's so important to me. I'm so excitable, and I get so excited about things. Like I want someone, like if I'm getting amped up and you're like, oh, my, here he goes again, right? Oh, that would be such a fucking turnoff for me. Sexuality was a huge thing for me. Like, are you going to be able to rise to my level? Like, are we going to be compatible in that way? So back then, like really, really, like those were really important things to me. Film was such a thing that we bonded over. Like, are you into film? What are some of your favorite movies? Like, what gets you amped up in a movie? Like the passion side, I wanted to see, like, could we connect over that? And it's really about knowing yourself, knowing what things, like, what do you want to be around? That, like, when you start thinking about forever, ever, like that's like, man, you really need to be compatible with somebody at that moment because it's only going to get harder, right? As you begin to grow as people, to really grow in a convergent way where you're coming together, like that does not happen by accident. So if you don't at least start with these anchor things, like family is important to us, romance is important, sex is important, ambition is important. I wanted to make sure that you were comfortable with my ambition, right? I didn't need you to be ambitious. In fact, I was really conflicted about ambition in you at the beginning of our relationship. I didn't know if it would be beneficial, if it wouldn't. And in the end, it worked out that you respond really well to my ambition, that you're attracted to that, and that you can, like, rise to any occasion, right? So if it's like, hey, we need to build something, and for the next 5 years, we just got to grind. Like, you grind, and you grind with the best of them. You don't flinch, you don't hesitate. And so that was amazing. But it wasn't that you just, like, were burning, like you had some chip on your shoulder and you had something to prove, which is how I feel, right? I have that chip. And if we both had that and we were going in divergent directions because you had something different to prove than I had to prove, and we were pulling in opposite directions, I could see that being a mess. And you've sort of always been my anchor to keep me sane and sober and not ever let me sort of stare into the abyss too long, and to, make sure that I stay centered on the beautiful things and the good things. And you've always been such a positive reinforcement when it comes to that, and keeping me focused on things that really matter over the long term. But yeah, like finding, like, those things that are maybe silly, right? Like the Christmas thing. Yeah. Maybe it's silly, but it's real to me and it's important to me. And so I wanted to make sure that we discussed things like that.
And I think the anchor thing is very important, because when you look back, or when I look back, we actually were really different. We come from very different upbringings. So I'm Greek Orthodox. I was brought up very...
So am I.
Yes, you are. You are now.
Now, yes, I wasn't at the time.
You know, and so I grew up in a very Greek community in North London, very religious, went to Greek school on the weekend, you know, all these things that were so different from your life. You're a white boy from Tacoma. And
That's racist.
you call yourself that. So yeah, like I think our upbringings were very different, and you like different music. I was into R&B and you were into the screaming music.
Also known as rock, I think. Yeah.
You know, and so we had a lot of things that were very different, but our anchors were exactly the same. So I think that was, you know, yeah, the one thing that I actually loved, that you were so different, because you were teaching me. It was like opening a whole new world that I'd never like gone into. And the fact that you weren't christened and that you were like looking into, you know, being Greek Orthodox and what the just as a tradition, all our traditions that we do, like you were so enthusiastic about learning it. So yeah, there was just this core thing between us that was exactly like just totally aligned.
Yeah, and then one other question I'll throw out that's really powerful, whether you're hiring or whether you're scoping a potential significant other. A magic genie walks in the room, they'll grant you one wish and one wish only, can't ask for more wishes, can't cure cancer, it's got to be something for yourself. What do you wish for? That will reveal a lot. Okay, next one I think is you.
All right. Okay, question from Alex Landony. What are the biggest challenges you faced and overcome together on a personal and business level?
Oh, so this is what I was talking about in the beginning that I would hope I would, what I hoped I would remember, and I've remembered it, which was when we transitioned. So you were a stay-at-home artist for years, and we'd gotten into an awesome rhythm there. I was chasing my ambition. I was growing as an entrepreneur. I was really pouring myself into that, working 7 days a week. Even when we would go home at Christmas time, I would work. And because you had a lot of free time and were really doing artistic things and spending days sort of exploring beauty and creation, it was, you know, there was no sort of struggle. We were opposite sides of the coin. It was so nice to come home and to engage with your art and to see what you'd created and sort of remember like that side of myself. And so it was this wonderful yin yang balance of I had just gone crazy down the path of ambition and was just working myself, you know, I won't say to death, because I was so proud of myself for going that all in, and I was so excited about the skill set that I was gaining. But it was just hard energy. It was hard driving, like, you know, really pushing forward, like sort of steeling myself for, you know, combat all the time, like getting punched in the face and be able to get back up and keep going. And so to come home to a very soft energy was incredible. And then when we founded Quest, you just went all in and took one of the hardest jobs that we had doing fulfillment and growing that. And you ended up having, you know, a gaggle of employees yourself, and they were all tough nuts, you know, former criminals and just randomly really big burly guys. And so it was like you had to really steel yourself and become very hardened and tough, and we would come home and it would just be talking about the problems of the day and talking about, you know, all the things that you were having to deal with, and you becoming, I should say, channeling much more masculine energy. And that created a lot of friction. And it was really hard for me to lose that sort of genteel, feminine, artistic energy, and to really allow myself to, you know, step back and say, look, she's becoming like this really powerful, amazing woman. And you were so excited about the person you were becoming. In fact, you should speak to that. But so what was that period like for you?
Yeah, it was definitely a transition. To be honest, For a long time, I was always kind of just go, go, go. Like my biggest driving force was to impress my husband and to always make him feel 100% supported. So when you were like, oh, hey, we're going to start, protein bar company. Do you mind just doing a couple of shipping boxes just from the rug at home? Like it would take like 10 minutes a day. Cut to, a couple of months later, I'm shipping out of, your business partner's garage. Cut to a year later, I'm running our whole shipping and fulfillment. And it ended up being, 40, I think probably only 3 women worked in my department. So, you had like 37 men, and some of them were 6'8" and had criminal records. But having such a strong mother who never took shit from anyone, sometimes maybe not the right move.
A little over the top. This woman, just sidebar really fast, my mother-in-law, the sweetest human being you will ever meet. And I remember the first time somebody flipped her, and she just went like, don't fuck with me. Right. Don't you dare call me sweetheart. It was amazing. It's a great family story. And realizing, whoa, like under that sweet exterior is somebody who you do not fuck with.
Yeah, and growing up, my parents, got divorced when I was around 8 years old. Seeing my mom be, the mother and father of the household. My dad was very much involved. My mom and dad stayed in, contact. My dad was over every week. But on a day-to-day basis, my mum ran the house, right? So if there was a problem with the plumbing, she would sort it. And so she had to have a hard edge to her because other people would take advantage of a woman with 3 young kids. And so seeing that, I always embodied it. And so once I started getting in this position of I'm running fulfillment, I've got all these employees, my driving force really was I can't fail because I won't let you down. Like I am here to support you and what we're doing 100%. And this is Bilyeu Enterprises, me and you. And so if half of us fail, we both fail. So for me, it was a responsibility. And so I never let myself believe there was an option apart from deal with the shit that's coming your way. And it did harden me. And I remember us talking about that, where I was no longer putting your clothes out for you the night before when you got up, pack you a lunch. I wasn't doing any of that. And we had the very harsh discussion of what is important to you that I deliver as a wife. And then for me, what is important for you to deliver as a husband, and then what is important for me to feel. So I wanted to be, I loved what I was doing. I loved kind of developing skills, growing, feeling that growth. That was important to me. And so when I said I'm loving learning and that, you were always very supportive. But on the flip side, then it was like, okay, but what is important to you that I deliver as a wife? To you never cared about having lunch on the table or anything like that, but it was the sweetness, the lovingness of a wife. And so we really had to kind of, work together in maneuvering as we grow, like, making sure that we're both growing in the direction that we're both happy with as individuals, and then in the direction of that we're happy as a couple. And then, finding that balance.
To bring it back around to that being a difficulty in our lives, it's so important to communicate with the other person. Everything in your story really resonated with what was going on, which is we were talking through it, right? We were identifying like what's important to you, what's important to me. And that's something that I think has really been a key to our success, is defining terms. Like what does the word important mean? What does the word promise mean? And getting into the nitty gritty of that and making sure that we're, always staying true to those tenets. So that, that's important. And we certainly made it through that. And impact theory just would never have been able to be possible if you hadn't learned to be an entrepreneur, if you hadn't risen up and, learned those hard lessons to toughen up, to be able to be both an artist and an executor.
Right.
All right. Next question. This is from Serena TV. What's something you rarely see couples do that would really benefit them if they did do? I'll stick with, actually, why don't you answer that? What do you think?
Yeah, I would say just honesty.
You rarely see people be honest.
I think as couples, people are so afraid to hurt the other person's feelings that I don't think they're necessarily trying to lie, but they're so trying to preserve the other person's feelings that they may twist the truth. And I think that that doesn't actually serve you, right? Going back to the top situation, it's having discussed it, having you been honest, having gone through this scenario in the future, how do we fix it in the future so that I don't feel like this, and making sure that you can still value yourself on being honest. You know, just discussing that got us to then be okay with brutal honesty. And, you know, obviously being a partnership, being, you know, doing impact theory, I have to be honest with you sometimes when I think this is going wrong, this isn't working. And if all I worried about is hurting my husband's feelings, I would fail my job. And by my job, I mean being your partner. And so if I just worried that you would get upset or I'd hurt your feelings because now you think that you're not impressing me, it just ends in disaster.
So one of the biggest arguments that we've ever been in our entire lives was over a cup of tea.
That's true.
Very early in our relationship. And I was one of these times I was working so hard. I was spending so many hours at work and we were broke and I wanted to take you away for the weekend. And so I had very little time. All I was thinking about was, oh my God, like I'm taking time off work. Like I was really panicking about it. So I thought at least like this is going to be something that she's going to love. She's going to appreciate. And so we're getting ready to go. I wake up, packing everything, ready to go, waiting for you. And I'm like, we're trying to get up to the resort. It was, of course, somewhere that we could drive to because we couldn't afford to be flying anywhere. And when I'm ready to leave, all of a sudden you're like, I just want to make a cup of tea. And I was like, what? Like, I'm paying for this hotel. It costs like $150. I'm freaking out. Like, I want to get there the second they'll let us into the room. We still have to drive like, an hour and a half or whatever. And you want to stop and have a cup of tea?
I didn't have my morning breakfast tea.
And it was so funny. So we end up like, it spirals out of control. We end up getting in this huge argument. We're driving there because you finally like begrudgingly, did you have the tea?
No, I didn't bloody have the tea.
You didn't have the tea. You finally like,
you got so
fine,
pissed
like
with me.
we'll just go. And then we're arguing about it the whole way. And I'm like, fuck it, let's just turn around. Like, let's go home. Like this, we're in such a bad mood. This is supposed to be great. And then finally we calm down and both realize this is not about the tea.
Yeah.
And what is this really about?
Yeah.
And so we began to, and it became a long-standing thing that we would do whenever we would start to argue over something is, what is this really about? Like, what's that baseline emotion that you're trying to deal with? And for me, it was, I'm taking time off work, which makes me, I've so promised myself that I was going to go really hard, that I was going to do everything I could to to be successful, to really, do something with this family. And if I'm going to take time off and prioritize you and show you that you're my number one, that you're more important than that as much as I want to do that I am going to prioritize you, that if we're going to spend money on this, that it be appreciated and that you recognize it. And so when you didn't seem bothered that, about leaving, it was so shocking. And yet from your perspective, it was completely different.
Yeah, from my perspective, it was you work, I never see you, we're going on this lovely trip, I love my breakfast, my tea for breakfast.
And I'm trying to give you a gift, right?
Right.
And so why am I having a go at you if this is meant to be a gift?
Right, exactly. I think, was it for our anniversary or birthday or something like that? So it's like, well, if what you're trying to do is make me happy, if that is your goal, and for me, having a tea in the morning before I do anything makes me happy. And so if your goal is to make me happy, why are you being so annoyed that I want to have a tea before we go on this wonderful trip? So then it was like, well, you work all the time. You're showing me a sign of putting me first, but you're not actually putting me first because you're not doing what I want to make me happy.
Right.
So once we kind of had that like brutal discussion, we now call everything the tea situation.
Yeah, like we're arguing about the tea right now.
Right. But it's not about the tea.
Right. You're arguing about the straw that broke the camel's back or the thing that becomes sort of the flashpoint, but isn't really the thing. And so one thing that we've really practiced and developed over time is how quickly can you identify that you're talking about the tea and then get to the real thing, because the real thing is usually some authentic emotion that the other person did not mean to trigger, right? Because you were right. Like if I'm just trying to make you happy, if I'm trying to do something beautiful in our relationship, to be pissed that you want a cup of tea is like madness,
Right.
like literally the definition of madness, because you're saying that your goal is to make the person happy. The person's telling you what they actually want to be happy, and you're saying, no, I'm going to make you happy this way, right? Which is crazy.
Yeah.
So, but then once I could explain, like, hey, here are all these things that mean something to me, and I want to make sure that you understand, like, me taking time off work is not an easy decision. And once we were having the real conversation, then it was like we felt like we better understood each other, and we ended up having an amazing vacation. But
which is so important, because we plan to be married for the rest of our lives, and we got married and got together so young, and everybody changes. The hope is that you're not the same person last year that you are today, right? We always pride ourselves in trying to grow and get better every day. So if that's the case, then we're not going to be the same people 10 years ago that we are today. We're not going to be the same people today that we are in 10 years. And so if we're both growing and evolving and we don't have those types of discussions, now you're kind of growing in different directions. And so growing in different directions, and then having those little moments that you're not articulating with the other person, because what's important to you today may change tomorrow or may change in a year. So if you're not vocalizing what is important, how you communicate with each other, in 10 years, you almost don't know the other person. Like you said, it's the straw that broke the camel's back. We always said we never want to get to that point. So even if it may seem as simple in, the face of it, it's about tea, we really do analyze and talk openly about what that real situation is, so that the next time it doesn't happen again, and that you don't find yourself in 10 years being so bitter that they don't care about you, when it's not the truth.
Yeah, I almost wish that there was some bigger secret to relationships than communicating, but man, that's it.
Yeah.
And being willing to be honest, like, one thing that I think is pretty critical that people need to be able to do is, even when your motives are impure or they're petty, to be honest about what they are. And that just goes a long way. It goes a long way, man, once you know what you're actually fighting for.
And knowing that your partner's not going to call you petty or use that against you. I think that's very important, because being petty, everybody is at some point in their lives. And I think that if you can just acknowledge that everyone at some point is that, and that you don't then judge the other person when they are, and they're being honest about it, then you can have those discussions.
100%. All right, which one of us asked the last question?
Well, I did want to say one more thing about the personal and business. So when we started really working together full-time, I was running shipping at Quest, or even when I, transitioned over to running our media department.
Sorry,
our daughter
has joined us.
Yeah, our little
dog. How dare you?
No, our daughter. Whoops.
You want to say something to everybody? Oh, kisses.
So we always had that discussion. So we had that discussion of, okay, we're about to get in seriously business together. And I remember you turning around to me and you said, look, I just want to make it abundantly clear, I am the boss. I am your boss. And so, we kind of established our roles immediately within the company. That
sounds horrible, by the way, but is so important.
Yeah, and I actually didn't take it as it being horrible.
No, for sure.
Yeah. I just thought, okay, cool. We're establishing our roles just like we did in our relationship, where, you're alpha and I'm beta, and I will always, be your support. But we had that discussion. And even with work, it's I am your boss. And so the one thing for me was never to feel like I was in a position at work because I was your wife. And so it was always very important that I worked and earned my position. So whether I was running fulfillment, again, or the media department, I wanted to make sure that you weren't feeling bad, oh, well, she's my wife, so I'm going to put her, she wants this. And I remember one day I turned around to you and I said, I just want you to know, if I'm not doing a good job, if I'm failing, if I'm not up to, the task at hand, either fire me, demote me, or hire someone above me. I want you to know that that's okay. To give you that peace of mind that you weren't going to hurt my feelings if that happened. And you turned around to me, and I remember this, you looked me in the eyes and you said, baby, the reason why I do what I do and the reason why I work as hard as I work is to provide for my family, to provide for you. So if you're getting in the way of me providing for you, you bet your ass I'm going to fire you or demote you or promote someone above you. And that's why I keep going back to honesty, because in that moment, that was the truth. And so, yeah, it was that's how I think me and you have really worked together, is that we're always very honest about what our roles are, what we're looking for. You know, if the role wasn't serving what I was looking for, I wouldn't do it. And, you know, we've always had that discussion as well, is like to never feel forced into a position that I'm not happy doing.
Right. And the important thing about all this stuff is making sure that, you know, what I was saying earlier, that you make the other person feel good, right? I can get away with statements like that, and they, in the abstract,
Right.
if you start aggregating all the times where I said, like, I am the boss, or
Right.
don't worry, I would fire you. If you don't understand that those like 0.01% of the things that I say, and that all the rest of the time, like, I'm making sure that I build you up and making sure that, and all true things, like, you don't have to falsify something to make somebody feel great about themselves. You need to focus them and yourself on the things that they do well, where they shine, where they're bringing amazing value, and give them the courage and confidence to do more of that. So, you know, making sure, like, going back to that notion of contempt, like, you cannot focus on the negative things. Like, you've got to focus on the things that are great. Oh my God, like, this is something that I do a lot. Like, when you go to criticize, instead of criticizing, compliment. And like, literally using the trigger of, like, somebody does something that winds you up. Like, my wife tidies everything. Oh my God. And it drives me mad. I like things to be where I put them, right? But you like everything to be tidy. Now, which is better? Neither, right? It's like a personal thing.
Yep.
I think anybody would look and say, oh, something being tidy, like, great. And I hope that people would understand that knowing where your things are is also nice. And so if I see you, like, moving something, and I have the impulse to be like, why are you tidying? Instead, it's like, I'll remind myself, you know what? Thank you for making sure that we're organized, and thank you for, you know, taking on that responsibility in the relationship. And it makes me reflect on, like, if I know what it looks like when I don't tidy, when I don't organize things, and it becomes mass chaos, right? So I'll use that, like, minor sort of fleeting moment to focus myself and externalize, which I think is really important, to say something that's real, that's truthful, but it gives me the impetus to say it out loud. And I think that if I could encourage you to do that with me, you know, that would be amazing as well. And you're so complimentary. I just don't know what the internal process is that triggers that for you. But, you know, doing things like that is just so useful.
Yeah, and going back to what you said just prior, is it's like a bank. Like, you've put so many chips in making. God, this man is ridiculously romantic.
Wow.
He's written me poetry, and I won't go too deep in that. But you've given just so much. You
have to make deposits. If you want to make a withdrawal.
Thank you. That's a much better way of saying it.
Well, you brought up the bank. I didn't want you to leave that metaphor hanging there. It's like a bank.
But
he's really romantic. Just like at a bank. You know how it goes. Girls, you know how it goes. Banks, romance.
Thank you. That's exactly it. So we're able to have those discussions without me feeling less, or, you know, inferior, or, you know, incapable. I mean, you know, so we have that beautiful balance. But yeah, so business and personal, it is difficult, and you just have to kind of work with the situation.
You know, and I don't want to make this too much about business, because I'm sure people listening to this don't care about business. They're never going to work with their significant other. But one thing that's really hard and that we struggle with on a daily basis is you're my partner in this business, but you're also my wife. And so was that comment as my partner or my wife, right? And I'm sure that you've had the same with me. And that shit, like, if anybody out there has an answer for us, like, I'm all ears, because that is something that is just like, the borders between the two are so porous. It's like, oh God.
Oh, can I tell a story?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So speaking of that, I remember one time, so we're at Quest, we had a big meeting. Oh God, there must have been like 10 people in the room or something. And I think I'd messed up, or something had happened, and you weren't amused, or you weren't happy with it. And because I was, you know, the lead of my department, whether it was, you know, whoever it was in my department, I take responsibility, of course I do. And so you made that very clear in that meeting. And you obviously know me very well, because I'm your wife, so you know all the little nuances in my facial expressions.
Micro-expressions.
Yeah, Mike, thank you.
Oh, yeah.
So you know all my micro expressions. So you knew in that moment I was upset.
Yeah.
But as my boss, you had to do, and look, I recognize that also other people see. So it is important that if I mess up, that you treat me like everybody else. Actually, maybe a little harsher.
I'm harder on you, there's no question.
You are harder on me, which is okay. But so in that meeting, you basically made it very clear that my department had messed up and you weren't amused, and what was I going to do about it to fix it? Cut to a few hours later, it's nighttime, I go home.
I remember this.
And you walk in the door, so I'd already come home before you. You walk in the door and you open the door and you're like, hey, babe, because he didn't know what he was going to come home to. Was I going to be furious, devastated, upset? And so, like, you had this, like, just little smile and just like, hey, babe. And I look, I'm like, hey, babe. And you kind of, like, maybe, I don't know,
I think I said, how was your day?
Yeah, you were like, how was your day? And in that moment, it's, do I blend my husband and my boss, or do I actually say I can separate these two? And if I say, okay, I know my boss was right. We did mess up. And so why wouldn't he call me on it? And then know my husband loves me. And as my husband, he wants me to have a good day. He wants me to succeed. He wants me to do great. He wants me to do well. So if I know that my husband wants that and my boss acted in accordance to who he should be. So when you were like, how was your day? I turned around to you, I said, yeah, you know what? My boss is an asshole, but how was your day?
Yes.
And so,
actually, I think you said my boss is an asshole, but other than that, I'm good.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to see you, or something like that.
Yeah. And I gave you a kiss, hello, and we both started laughing, and it's.
I have to say, you're so good at that. I really, really, really respect that about you. Is you can compartmentalize. You can rationalize in your head that there has to be a separation between my husband and
most days. Like anything, we're human.
Yeah, of course.
And that's when, we then, as my husband, you recognize that this is a difficult moment for me to separate. Right. And, we kind of talk about that.
Yeah, fair enough. And look, I mean, we definitely don't bat anywhere near 1,000, but I've always respected that about you, that you've really been able to break the two worlds apart. And even if that's how you just de-escalate, and doesn't necessarily stop you from being frustrated or being upset, but you're able to de-escalate and, and going back to holding you to a higher standard, I definitely do. You're the only person on the face of the earth that I hold to my standard, the standard that I hold myself to. And I don't think that's fair.
Why do you think that is?
Because I respect you. I consider you my equal. And it, rightly or wrongly, I see other people in the world, and I just think, I don't need you to want what I want or to be as driven as I am. And I think that's very valid. I think that those are very valid life choices, to want a more relaxed life, a less stressful life. But you and I are in this together. Mm-hmm. And if we're going to be equals, and I'm going to see you as my equal in every way, that accidentally means that I'm going to have to hold you to my standard. Otherwise, I'm sort of giving you a pass, right? And I'm saying, oh, it's okay for you. You don't have to play at this level. It's the same way I feel when somebody tells me, like, so I've had people come to me and say, I want to be you in 5 years. And the first thing I tell them is, don't say that. Because not that you're not capable, but I will then put you in a different box in my mind. And if you really want to, like, you want me to mentor you and help you get to that phase, like, you will instantly see me become a hard ass. Because now it's like, I'm going to externalize my internal dialogue. And you're going to hear how I talk to myself, which is not negative, but fuck. Like, it's hard. Like, I'm holding myself to a standard. Like, I'm saying, hey, come on, you're capable of more than this. Like, get your ass up. Let's get going. Focus. And so I do sometimes feel a bit bad that a side effect of you and I being partners in life is that I hold you to my standard.
But you shouldn't feel bad, because I really think, and we've said this from the beginning, sink or swim, we're going together. So for you to hold yourself to a standard and not expect that equal from me means that we're not equal in our relationship.
Yeah, and that's why I do it. I just, when you're the one in control of it, it's a lot easier to deal with, right?
For sure.
So in my own head, I can either hit the gas or the brake, and I make that decision. And you can tolerate a lot more pain when you're in control.
That's interesting.
And so when it's, I mean, they've done studies on it. So I know that I'm sort of imposing my standard on you from the outside, and that's always going to make it harder to deal with. All right, next question.
I think it's you, yeah.
All right, what habits, this is from Chris W. What habits do you two do each week that keep your relationship growing?
I want to know if we have different things that come to our minds. I can think of...
Yeah, I would assume they'll be different.
Yeah, so for me, it's spending certain time together.
I could have, like, if we were on national television right now, I would have won
one of those
that.
quizzes.
Oh, 100%. My wife and I practice that, by the way.
Say 3 things then that I'm thinking of.
Oh, man. I would have got the
on the
first.
spot.
That's the only thing I can say is that my wife handles the logistics of the relationship.
But what
make sure
are
that we
those?
spend time together.
What are those?
All right,
3
so
things?
let's try
Let's
it.
see.
Okay, so spending time together. What do we do to make sure our relationship is growing? Spending time together. Are you going to lump in like eating meals and
That's
stuff
what
together?
I'm saying. No, out of spending time together, what are the 3 things to me?
Perfect. Perfect. Eating together.
Yes.
And when we say eating, she means chewing at the same time.
What does everyone else mean?
Like, so for instance, let's say that we're going to have a meal together and my meal takes longer to prepare than yours. And you like your food really hot. I don't really care.
Yeah.
So you sit down, your food's hot. I'd be like, hey, I'm going to take like 5 more minutes. No worries. Like, go ahead and eat. I'm like right here. She's not having that. Like, that does not play.
No,
like,
we sit down
we
at
gotta
the
be
same
chewing
time
together.
and
So
we're eating.
she's like tinfoiled it. And if I'm not fast enough, it's like, like, how much longer is this going to be? My food's getting cold. Like, so that's really timing meals.
Specifically, though, on a Saturday morning at the dining table.
Yeah, you know what? You're 100%. Like, breakfast on a Saturday is your jam.
Yeah, because
no
we
question.
during the week are so busy. You're in the gym at 3 a.m. Like, we just kind of pass each other a lot because we're so busy. You know, we obviously work together all the time. But yeah, for me, after that long week, Saturday morning at the dining table.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I've got a real thing. I hate sitting at the dining table. So it's like this big emotional sacrifice for me to sit at the table.
But that's
to show
actually
my
an interesting
love.
part of answering this question is, what are the things that each of you value, or what is that important moment that you value and you're willing to do for the other person because you know that they really do value that. So even though you hate it, even sometimes on Saturday mornings where I may even suggest, oh, we can go sit on the sofa if you want. You know it's important to me that you're like, no, we're going to sit at the table.
The only thing that trumps that, though, is if it's really sunny and warm, you'd prefer to eat outside in the sun.
I would, yeah, for sure.
Get that vitamin D. Okay, so that's one. Are we? Those aren't 2 different things, right? So that's one.
No, that's
eating
one.
together.
Yeah.
I'm only gonna. So my wife showers together.
Yes,
does that make your list? Okay, so well, hey everybody, welcome inside our lives.
When you're as busy as we are, you find those little moments, and showering is so intimate.
It does tend to be that way, yes, which is amazing. And then the third one, going to bed at the same time?
Yes, but specifically me falling asleep on your chest.
On my chest, yeah. For sure.
So those 3 really intimate moments for me, like if we didn't do on a weekly basis, I would start to feel disconnected with you.
Yeah, 100%. And there have been times where they do break down for whatever reason, and you're really good about saying. And I have to say, we have different thresholds for that. So you'll start to feel disconnected before I do.
And that's, again, important, just going back to communication, is when I'm starting to feel the burn and you're just go, 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 and things are so exciting at work, and you may not think about those little things. And so we know that you can rely on me to be like, okay, we need to pause. We haven't gone to bed together. Please stay up for another 10 minutes while I can get ready or whatever. And we just make a point of it. And yeah, I think going back to honesty again, you just have to be honest with your partner about what those moments are and making sure that you spend those times doing it.
Yeah, and here's where your obsession with the female brain, which is a book, by the way, I highly recommend everybody read it.
I'm obsessed with it. I've read it like 3 times now, and I did say I don't read books, so that's the one that.
That's your one exception.
Yeah,
you read more than that.
I do, but I'm just saying.
But it is like if I read,
I would never reread a book
50 books
ever.
a year. You read 4.
Yes.
Yeah, so
because I listen to music instead, because music actually is very.
My wife is a walking DJ booth. I actually know she's coming because I hear the music first.
Yeah,
that is very true. And I don't know how you do it in the morning, where you're listening to like hardcore club music.
Yeah.
Oh my God! Like sometimes I'm like, I've been up for 5 hours by the time, you're playing your club music, and it's still too early for me to be listening to club music.
But you listen to books to create a certain emotion, right?
Look, I get music. I love music
to change
too.
your chemical.
I listen to music to change my chemicals.
But yeah,
like at 6 a.m, no matter how long I've been up, like that's rough. I don't know how you do it.
All right,
But
so
yeah, you do love your music. I love music, but I think you like it more than I do.
Yeah, I do.
And
So
that's
what is your answer to that question?
What do we do to keep our relationship growing? Well, I'm going to take growing to mean, like, how do we develop our relationship, like in an active role? And the biggest one for us, and I totally get this is unique to us, but is the business. And, really, like, we're both open to feedback and how we can be better, and we're so goal oriented. There's just a clarity in that, and getting together and what's working, what's not working, what are you having fun with, like, where do you want to grow to, like, actually having those conversations and talking through our foibles, like, oh man, just owning, like, oh, I'm so shitty at this, or I can't believe that my emotions got the best of me in that, and processing through those things, processing out loud. Like, if I really had to, like, put a fine point on it, we process out loud a lot. We talk through things. We reassess, like, where we want to go, and because we have the lens of the business, like having built a company that's actually taking us where we want to go, creating the companies we want to create, creating the content that we want to create. Like, it's like, as a company, the medical device company that we're exploring, like, is an expression of something I want to see come into the world. The content are things like focusing on female superheroes and telling empowering stories to women is something you're so passionate about.
Yeah.
And so just through having the lens of the business to really talk about those things that are that important, because you didn't used to externalize, I'm sure it was always there, but you didn't used to externalize, like, how passionate you are about women's issues, talking about things that you struggled with growing up, and having the lens of the business to really focus on that and to have an outlet for that. I've actually learned a lot about you. And
That's interesting.
Oh, for sure. Because with, me, I need to hear things like multiple times before I recognize the pattern. My wife is way better at recognizing patterns than I am, which isn't supposed to be. Guys are supposed to be better at pattern recognition, but you're way better than I am. And in fact, that's something that we routinely joke about, where you'll say something like, oh, eating breakfast every morning at the dining room table. And I'm like, you really think I've noticed that pattern? Like, I get that you like to eat, but that it's at the table. Like, it took me so literally years to recognize that the pattern was on a Saturday, eating, chewing at the same time, at the table, like, all those things which to you are so self-evident.
But then also understanding, this is why I love the female brain so much, is understanding that your brain is structured very differently to mine, right? Male and female. And that a part of your brain that notices those things, I think it's like after, I can't remember if it's like as a fetus, but that once you're determined your sex, that disappears. And so if your testosterone hits, now that part of the brain is filled with testosterone and aggression because, you were meant to go out and hunt and bring food back. And so that part of the brain didn't grow for you. And I think something like it grows 400% with women in the first...
Which part of the brain are you talking about?
I'm going to read the fact because I'm very bad at memory.
Nice. Wow, you brought facts.
I did. I brought facts.
That's legit.
I'm bad at memorizing facts.
But she'll memorize every detail of an argument that we've had.
Yes. Okay. So here we go.
Impressive. I am impressed.
Females' eye contact and mutual gazing grows 400%, leading to better facial expressions, observations, and better tonal recognitions. Boys doesn't grow at all.
Wow, that's funny. That's really, really interesting.
All right, so sadly we're, I think, wrapping up, but I have...
Yeah, we'll do one more.
One more question that I actually have for you.
All right, let's hear it.
So, you always ask...
Not sure how to interpret this cheeky smile you have, though.
So you always ask at the end of every episode...
Yes.
What is the impact you want to have on the world? So my question is, what is the impact you want to have on me?
Wow. Honestly, I think if you boil it all down, I want you to feel good about yourself. Like, I just want you to be, I want you to see you the way I see you. And that I mean, at least the way that I perceive you is like the greatest gift that I could ever give is for you to really understand how I think of you, for you to really understand how you've impacted me and how you've grown as a human being, and how I stand in awe of your work ethic and how like hardcore you are, that you work me under the table in the gym. Your ability to suffer is absolutely legendary. Yeah, and just the way that I've seen you grow over time is just really, really astonishing. So at the end of the day, like all the success and everything is very important to me. Don't get me wrong, and that's part. I want to give you a better life. You know, like I feel like you bet on me. Yeah, I mean, in no uncertain terms, like I took you out of a much more comfortable life, and you know, we had a few years of hardship, and you never flinched, and you know, always understood. You always believed in my vision. In fact, we haven't talked about. So I always choose a shirt for the person that I'm interviewing, and I chose for you my day one shirt because you have been on my side from day one. And nobody ever, not even remotely close, has believed in me like you believe in me. And so because of that, like I just want you to see like how I think of you. You might get a little big-headed if you did, but
okay.
It would be a pretty amazing gift.
Very cool.
So, well, I want to ask you one question, and I won't just throw back the same question that you asked me. God, there's a couple that I want to ask, but I'll go with one that I think will be most useful to everybody else. Why do you think we've lasted so long?
Oh, why do I think we've lasted so long? So a lot of people say, oh, you're lucky. I get that all the time. You guys are so lucky you found each other. Luck has nothing to do with it.
If it does, we've certainly capitalized on that.
Fair enough. But we work hard at our relationship. And I think we have the same, we have the same goal. Like we plan to be married for the rest of our lives. And we sincerely
and don't plan to die.
And don't plan to die.
So let's throw that in there.
Okay, so let's throw that in there. So we plan to be married forever. And in order to do that, like we both have parents who are divorced. The divorce rate is crazy. And so the likelihood of us getting divorced is, 50%. And so it's how do you improve those odds? And not even improve those odds, what do you do every day to make sure that you don't get to that point? And yeah, I just think we talk about it all the time. We talk about our emotions. We talk about what is going wrong when we're not happy. I've always been very honest with you. If you're working just too hard, you're not investing maybe enough time in our relationship, and I'm very open with saying that to you without making you feel bad about it. Right? It's like I don't use guilt, you don't use guilt. And we understand and we research the brain, understanding why, we're finding some emotions in certain moments, why we're feeling the way we're feeling. And we communicate all of that. Even when we know that you could hurt the other person, it's kind of what we discussed before.
Can I add something to that? You don't judge me.
No.
Thank you guys for joining us. I hope you guys are all having a wonderful, wonderful Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's
Do something
Day.
special for the person you love. Externalize how you feel. Make them feel better about themselves in a true, authentic way. Man, there's no greater gift. So thank you guys so much for joining us on this Valentine's Day episode of Impact Theory.
Thank you.
And until next time, my friends, be legendary. Love you.
Love you too, baby.